lovely.
Deck the halls.
Deck the halls. Welcome back, everyone, to episode 30 of the Popcorn Head podcast with your host, Gavin Wilton. I'm coming down your chimney a little prematurely than usual, and I'm joined by my little elves, Mr. Roy Moore and Tom Brady.
Yeah.
It's Christmas Eve, guys. We're here. We hope you're sorted for tomorrow, and you hope you're ready to spend a nice day with family or friends. And if you don't have any family or friends to spend Christmas with, well, I'm sorry, I guess. I don't know. Anyway.
Should have made some different choices.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll open us up. I've got a question here, if you can call it a question, but it kicks us off nicely. Woodstock NI, otherwise James Pollock, when I asked for a question, he just said National Lampoons.
Oh,
And that's it. He just said National Lampoons.
also very funny. Chevy Chase.
But it leads into what I want to talk about a wee bit. I want to talk about any sort of like film traditions you might have over Christmas. Like, is there certain stuff you like to watch annually around this time of year, Rory?
Boxing Day every year, I always watch Great Escape.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah. What about like in the build up or anything? Is there like Christmas Day even?
Oof, I don't normally get very many films watched on Christmas Day. Just whatever's on the TV.
Yeah.
I've very rarely hooked one out.
Call the Midwife. What the fuck is that show? What is that show?
I have no idea.
It's only on at like Christmas.
It used to be on a lot more as a thing, and then it's like Downton Abbey. Like Downton Abbey, they stopped, but then they come back for like a Christmas special every now and then.
Every year they have to slog out a special for Christmas.
Same with Gavin and Stacey. They stopped, and then
they're doing that again this year. It's like the final episode. Yeah.
It's gonna be the last one apparently, but I thought the last one was going to be the last one. So
yeah, you would think the last one would be the last one, but it's like Elton John's retirement tour. Or Phil Collins, he did a retirement tour in like '99 or something. What about yourself, Tom?
It's like one of those old people who's been dying for 20 years. I don't really have any traditions. As I said to you when we were talking about this episode before, usually whenever someone brings up a tradition, I become hostile, like an Oblivion NPC. Like that music starts to play in the background.
Someone's been murdered.
You know, if you try and like pick their pocket or something, and then they try and fight you. Yeah, no. The only Christmas tradition that I observe is chicken with Yorkshire puddings as my Christmas dinner.
Oh, nice.
Which I know is not the traditional, but
see, I love it.
It's my version of the cauliflower is traditional thing from Peep Show.
I love a Yorkie, but never had them in a Christmas dinner at the Wilton household. Never.
We were talking about this the other day, and my mum was like, "Oh, I've got a recipe for like making your own Yorkshire puddings," and I was like, "If I had my way, your fucking Christmas dinner would be in a giant Yorkshire pudding."
I love those.
Yeah, they are great. Have you ever made your own Yorkies?
No, but brilliant. I might do it this year.
Brilliant.
I'm going to make sure I don't fuck it up. I might have to make them like a week before.
I'll do that. I'll practice a week.
Yeah.
I had a roast beef last night. We were out for dinner, and it was a great homemade Yorkie. You know, like all misshapen and big and all over the place.
Yeah. My like Christmas film traditions, I'll watch like every Christmas Day. I'll watch It's a Wonderful Life and be absolutely miserable for 110 minutes, and then cry with happiness for 10 minutes. I'll watch like the Santa Claus Jingle All the Way as well.
That was like my teenage favorite Christmas movie.
Yeah, really good. But Rory will know this. Rory knows I have some like weird Christmas film traditions. I love to watch Jurassic Park.
Yeah, you really like Jurassic Park.
On Christmas Eve, I love to watch Jurassic Park. You know why it is? Because I remember as a kid.
Because you're thinking about your family and you're like, welcome to Jurassic Park.
I remember as a kid, like I don't know what age it would have been, but it was a definite period where I'd be opening my Santa presents at like, I don't know, 8 or 9 a.m. and I swear to God, Jurassic Park was on the TV at like 8 a.m. on the. The 90s were just a different breed. It was a different time.
Are you sure it wasn't like on video cassette?
I can't remember, but it feels like it was. It feels like it was.
I feel like you were putting it on the TV.
You know, and then you'd have like, I don't know, something like Goldfinger on after as well. You know? Goldfinger, you know. Yeah, that was before like Christmas got all woke, you know, and they on the TV, No Country for
Can't say Christmas anymore.
Like before I got all woke. No Country for Woke Man.
I love how the war on Christmas has been, you know, being fought for about 20 years and people are still saying Christmas. It's remarkable.
Yeah. I've got a question here from Belfast Art Boy. He asks, what are the best/worst side characters in Christmas movies? I've got a few for you, mate. So Bernard from the Santa Claus, who is like the Jewish elf boss,
yeah.
he's kind of sly. Like he's obviously in charge.
Is
of
he
all
an
the elves.
anti-Semitic stereotype?
He's definitely from New York, like, you know, he's just kind of sly, you know. Thinking about good ones, good side characters, Marv and Harry from the Home Alone films.
Oh, yeah.
You know, fucking Joe Pesci and I can never remember the other guy's name,
I
but
know,
they're brilliant, obviously.
neither can
you know.
I, but he's quite famous.
Piers Morgan in Home Alone 2 as the pigeon woman.
Piers Morgan? What?
You never seen that, Tom? She looks.
I do not remember that.
So there's
That's
a pigeon
Piers
lady
Morgan.
in.
Oh yeah.
He came out this year and denied that it's him. Obviously, it's a joke. Like,
Oh, but like when you, Paddy, when you say like worst characters, I enjoy like the quote unquote worst characters. Like,
did you just reveal that guy's name?
oh sorry, Paddy. Oh sorry, Belfast Art Boy. So you got like Uncle Frank and Buzz from the Home Alone films. You remember them, Rory? Like Buzz is the
Yeah.
older brother,
Buzz
really
is-
sly,
yeah. He's
and
like the
Uncle Frank's a real sly guy as well. Always eating all the pizza.
Yeah, I was thinking about Buzz. Is Buzz in something else?
I don't know, but I
Toy
do.
Story.
I always love like the worst characters. Like we mentioned Jingle All the Way. Phil Hartman, the actor who plays Schwarzenegger's neighbor,
Yes.
and now they go, oh, these cookies.
He's from The Simpsons.
Yes, he does. Troy McClure, Lionel Hutz,
Yes.
Fat Tony.
He's fucking
He
amazing in that.
died. He died really young as well.
Oh, that's so disappointing.
It's very sad.
That's so sad because he's amazing in that film.
That's
he's
why-
so funny.
that's why
he's
Troy-
always he's trying to like horn in on the wife
Yeah,
because
yeah,
he's
yeah.
always away at work.
That's why Troy McClure's only in early Simpsons, because they retired
no
the character
way.
when he died. He died really, really young. It's sad as fuck. Yeah, yeah.
1998.
Holy
Isn't that nuts?
shit!
Yeah. So not long after Jingle All the Way.
50 years old.
That's crazy, man. He was
Yeah.
of some talent, like
He was
great
so
guy.
good.
Let's see.
He
49
would
years
have had like a big movie career
Damn
after that. I
right.
think.
Yeah. Let's see. Bad Movie Buff asks, what's the best Christmas scene in a non-Christmas movie? Well, I know mine for sure. Mine is definitely, you know, in Goodfellas, after they've pulled off the heist and they go in and they're all meet at the bar.
Oh
And
my
it's like,
god! And
come here, you! Come here! This kid's a genius! You know? Look at this kid, you know? What are you, fucking stupid? What's the matter with you? What's the matter with you?
what do you call the
Johnny
character?
Roast Beef.
Yeah.
Johnny Roast
Johnny
Beef.
Roast Beef comes in and his wife has a huge like white mink
And a new
coat.
car? Like a pink Cadillac or
Yeah.
something? What are you,
Pink
stupid? What's the matter
Cadillac.
with you? What's the matter with you? What the fuck is the matter with you? Yeah, that'll be my favourite. Another one you could say, you know, Godfather, whenever Vito's in hospital, that's during Christmas.
Oh yeah.
And Mike's like protecting him. with the guy.
And he who is it? It's like the guy.
I am Enzo,
Yeah.
the baker.
Yeah, he got him a job, and then he arrives at the hospital at the wrong time, and Michael like dragoons him into pretending to be like a thug
Oh, he puts
with
your-
a
puts your
gun.
collar
Yeah.
up and-
Yeah, he's like, put your hand in your pocket. And he's like, but I don't have anything in my pocket.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
another
great.
thing, yeah, great question. Another thing I love about sort of like Christmas and like, especially today, Christmas Eve, because today is definitely Christmas Eve
Yeah.
when we're recording this through the power of magic. You know? I love just having like quiet Christmas Eve pints. You know, I used to hate that thing where, like, back in the day, you know, it was like everyone had to meet at the same fucking place. It was like everyone who went to your school in one place. Like, I really,
I didn't
really did.
I
mind
don't mind
it.
if I was very merry.
You know why I hate it? It's
Yeah.
because you saw a lot of people who, to me, were like turkey. It's like, there's a reason why I only see you once a year. It was like that, you know. I much prefer just like, be quiet, go for a few pints, get a bit sloshed, get home, start cooking the Christmas ham, and get on Muppets Christmas Carol. That's what I love to do. Let's see. Kane Craigs asks, what is the best / worst storyline in Love Actually?
Oh, best. No, the worst one's your stupid guy going to America. Do after
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. That is shite.
That's terrible. But the best one is
Emma Thompson and Alan Rickman and The Office Tart.
Yeah, that's very, very, very good.
That's one of my favourites, definitely.
Or,
Crying over the Joni Mitchell CD.
Or
God love Emma Thompson. I hate the Keira Knightley one with your man holding up the placards at the front.
oh, that's the worst.
Awful,
yeah, that is
awful.
the worst.
Hugh Grant.
No,
no?
he's the prime minister in it.
Oh, right,
It's some-
okay.
That's a good
no,
one.
It's the guy from The Walking Dead. The
Andrew
main
Lincoln?
Rick.
Andrew Lincoln.
Yeah,
Coral.
Andrew Lincoln.
Yes.
It's
Oh my
him.
God. Yeah.
Coral. Yeah, that's him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I like the Hugh Grant one. If you're a teacher, your teacher woman.
Hugh Grant is Hugh Grant as the prime minister.
Yeah.
No, she's not a teacher.
But he's
at the school.
also like an avuncular stand-in for Tony Blair.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, he's not that bad. Don't worry.
alright,
He's a nice guy, really.
Yeah, Keira Knightley's awful in that. Don't I look pretty?
It's funny, actually. We were having like family lunch yesterday, and everyone was talking about how terrible Keira Knightley's performance was in some like TV show for women on Netflix.
Yeah. So let's see. Our resident London Island boy, Tom Deering, he's got questions directed at each person here.
Oh.
So he asks Rory, can you make stuffing without onions?
Yeah, well, my mum used to. And it was always very nice. It's always very
For
good.
context, Rory hates onions.
onions.
Well, quote unquote, hates onions.
Do you know what's happening? I bet you're getting stuffing out of like a box or something, as we sometimes do, but it's got like onion powder in it,
Secret onion.
and you don't know that it has onions in it.
And there was a while where mum tried to fill me with stuff like that, but I tasted too strongly. These days, I just eat the stuff and it's on the plate. Being honest, mate, I've been a lot more. You see, being in front of like the in-laws and all, you just sort of, I couldn't be doing this much. And refusing things flat out. So just have to eat it now. And
So Tom asks,
Have you grown to love it yet?
No,
because
not
it's
at
so
all.
good. It's like the greatest ingredient in human
I
cooking.
do like stuffing an awful lot, but yeah, I can definitely do without the onions.
So Tom asks me, what is the best scene in Die Hard? I'll tell you what my favourite is, Tom. It's the part where Alan Rickman basically gives a shout out to Northern Ireland. He demands the freedom of 7 members of the new Provo Front. That's my favourite part in Die Hard.
My favorite part in Die Hard, just before we go on, is the bit where he like, what has he done? Is it the bit where he's put one of the hostage takers on like an office chair and like tied his corpse to an office chair with a message, and then he's like,
Ho, ho, ho. Tom, I think he's trying to mug you off here. He asks Tom,
Wouldn't be like
what
him.
is your favourite Richard Curtis film?
I don't really know very much of his film
So Curtis
stuff.
is mainly a
I
writer.
know, but my answer to this is I'm not a huge fan of his films per se, but I love Blackadder, which he was one of the writers of.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
I forgot about that.
Stick that in your
Well, there you
fucking
go,
pipe
Tommy.
and smoke it.
So he only directed like 3 films, but he wrote like 4 Weddings and a Funeral, Notting Hill. He directed Love Actually and wrote it.
There's a lot of Christmas ones in here.
Yeah.
I liked that Beatles one yesterday where the guy's never heard.
Oh,
of it.
is that him?
Yeah, I thought it was decent.
I thought that was quite fun.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
all right.
The Boat That Rocked. I like The Boat That Rocked.
Oh yeah, that was quite good. Yeah.
Anyway, Rory, Tom asks, Rebel or Empire?
Empire.
Yeah.
Always.
Let's see.
It's been fomenting.
He asks me a secondary question. He says, Gavin, if you had to delete the filmography of either Kubrick or Scorsese, pick one. Honestly, Tom, the answer is easy for me. I'm deleting Scorsese.
Yeah.
As much as I love Kubrick and Scorsese, I even feel if I deleted Kubrick, Scorsese would kill me for choosing Kubrick over Scorsese because he's the titan. He is he is the master.
Yeah.
You know, there's no Scorsese without Kubrick. So it's.
And
I know he was
Scorsese-
trying to get me there, but
Scorsese, as good as he is, very formulaic.
Yeah.
Like, Kubrick is like an artist.
Rory, you'll like this. Ian asks, when will Gavin stop being a Grinch?
Oh, never. Never. He doesn't have his Christmas tree up. He doesn't plan on putting a Christmas tree up.
Well, you've always referred to me as being a bit of a Scrooge, haven't
You are. Ebenezer.
Ebenezer, which leads
Here.
us.
Funnily enough, before we get into that, there's like this, I don't know what it's like, some sort of rave song from the 90s called Ebenezer Good, where they tricked the BBC into having this song on where they like put a subliminal message in it that was basically like, ease are good, ease are good.
Okay, right, yeah.
It's very funny.
So this week for our 30th episode, our 3rd Popcorn Head special, we're doing a Christmas special, of course. And what better way to celebrate Christmas than to take a look at a piece of work that was incredibly influential on how Christmas has actually been observed and celebrated since the Victorian age. We're talking, of course, about Charles Dickens' novella A Christmas Carol, which was published in 1843. And alongside this great piece of text, we will be looking at its most famous and endearing film adaptation.
Is it its most famous?
It is its most famous, yeah. It's a film that many consider to be the greatest adaptation of a Dickens novel. And I'm, of course, talking about A Muppets Christmas Carol from 1992.
An unwanted enchanted creature, but not a rattleech or a cockroach.
Then what? Then what? What?
It's Ebenezer Scrooge.
Yes.
If I had him here, I would give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, and I bet he would choke on it.
Humbug.
Hey, I'm creating scarcity. Drives the prices up.
Rizzo.
Now, if you don't know the basic premise of A Christmas Carol, like, where have you been? But anyway, the novel basically follows this old miser called Ebenezer Scrooge, who on Christmas Eve is visited by various ghosts throughout the night. So when Dickens was writing A Christmas Carol, the holiday season of Christmas was sort of shifting. Things were changing and traditional aspects were being sort of like reevaluated. Like the concept of things like Christmas cards and Christmas trees were becoming very popular.
So much of it comes from Dickens, though. Like,
It does.
Dickens like, created the modern Christmas.
Massively
that we know,
influential.
like
and like people were getting back into things like caroling and stuff like that. So
Such a hilarious thing to
yeah,
do.
yeah. But like, I'm gonna knock on your door and disturb you and make you watch me sing at you,
And then ask you for money.
So Dickens, he'd actually written 3 Christmas stories prior to this, but what really inspired Dickens to write another Christmas story was this visit that he made to a school for London street children. It was called Field Lane Ragged School, and also the Cornish tin mines, where he witnessed children working in really bad conditions, and it really pissed him off. So he wanted to tell a story of like a wicked, selfish man who could somehow redeem himself into being seen as like a sympathetic character. And obviously you could draw some comparison here with like biblical texts and stories and stuff like that, because obviously, you know, Christianity was very, very popular at that time.
What do you
And
call your man? The tax collector, and he changed completely. Yeah.
was he the guy to climb the tree?
Yep.
To escape everybody?
Climbed the tree so we could see Jesus.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. What was his name?
Yeah, Jesus is a socialist. Jesus is like a revolutionary socialist.
Yeah, he
What was
loved it.
called?
Like,
Job or something, maybe.
you look at
Fuck,
it,
I
and I'll
don't know.
carry on.
Don't know the Bible well enough.
And then Paul and Saul as well, wasn't
Yeah.
it? So Saul was a bad man and he became Paul, and Paul was a good man. Right? Oh my God.
So,
Once he'd anglicized his name.
So since it was published, A Christmas Carol has never been out of print, and that's 181 years. Very impressive. Very impressive, sorry. And of course, over time, it has been adapted many, many times for stage, film, television, radio, even opera. Basically, any media you can imagine, it's been done.
Zacchaeus.
Zacchaeus, he loved it. Like,
Jesus took
Dr.
him.
Sayers, Dr. Sayers.
Jesus says to him, I'm coming.
get you down that tree.
I'm coming to your house for lunch. And then he goes to his house for lunch and tells him to give away everything, give away all your worldly possessions.
Yeah.
And he became a very good man, I think.
Good on him. So,
Did he become a follower of Jesus?
I think so, yeah.
Did Jesus pocket the money that he had made from selling all of his stuff by any chance? That tends to be the way with cult leaders. But anyway, here,
So-
I have a question before we
Yes.
go on. Is the director a Nepo baby? Is he the Muppets creator's son?
yeah, he literally is. Literally is. Yeah,
What do
yeah.
they call him Muppets creator?
Jim Henson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just saw the name and I was like, hold on a minute.
Yeah. So Charles Dickens, Charlie D, he was actually born into a pretty middle class family, but his dad loved to throw money around him, and they got into like real financial bother. And his dad actually ended up in a debtor's prison in 1824. So when Dickens was 12, he had to pawn all his books, he had to leave school, and he had to go work in this smelly, rat-infested shoe blackening factory, which is so Victorian. Like, it doesn't get more Victorian than that. And it was this experience at a young age that would really form Dickens' like social outrage, which would of course like heavily influence all his writings. And he would do this for 3 years before going back to school, before becoming then a journalist. And for 20 years, he would basically edit this weekly journal. And at the same time, he would write 15 novels, 5 novellas, hundreds of short stories. He would give lectures, he would perform readings, and he would write letter after letter. And he would also campaign for things like children's rights, education, and various other social reforms. He was the biggest celebrity of his era, and he created some of the most famous literary characters in history. And he's widely thought as being one of the greatest novelists of all time. Also worth noting at this time, his novels were published in serials. It's like weekly or monthly installments. So it wouldn't come out as like a whole book, you know.
I've got a good one about that. No Little Dorrit. Was that his last one?
I don't know.
Not sure.
I'm not sure if it was last, but it was definitely a late one.
But when there's boats, when people were ever getting to America, as they were getting off the boat, everybody was asking them what happens to Little Dorrit.
That's cool.
Does she live or does she die? Because obviously the next edition hadn't come out in America yet. And everybody is desperate to know.
Yeah, was the whole idea of like serials. It was very, very popular in the Victorian era, and Dickens knew this, and he incorporated a lot of cliffhanger endings into each serial publication.
Oh, so he's like the first TV writer, basically.
Pretty much. Like he was able to like break down, right? You know, they'll cut it here, or he basically left little marks, be like, maybe cut this serial here and move on to the next one. It's like little cliffhanger endings.
That's interesting.
To leave the
Very
public
interesting.
gagging for more, as you said, Rory. Even when you get off the boat, you're like, what the fuck happened? In Little Dorrit, you know? And he would also incorporate a lot of like topical events into his narratives, and that's what gave him such a wide appeal. Like so much so that the illiterate poor people would actually pay people a halfpenny each just to like have them read each serial to them, you know, and it actually did help inspire more people to learn how to read at the same time as well.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. So before A Christmas Carol, Dickens released a novel called Martin Chuzzlewit, which is a very funny. Dickens had a thing for funny character names. Rory, have you got a few there?
I've got 15 of them.
To be fair, English surnames and first names in that era were fucking hilarious at times.
We've got Sergeant Buzzfuzz, the Picnic Papers, Master Bates,
Oh,
from
aye.
Oliver
Nice.
Twist,
Nice.
Wackford Squeers from Nicholas Nickleby, Dick Swiveller,
So many porn names.
Yeah. Dirk Diggler.
Simon Tappertit,
Oh, aye.
Charlie Pecksniff.
Charlie Pecksniff.
Yeah, these are all like,
Oh, filth.
they're all blue.
Uriah Heep,
Oh, no, I need to see
a
the
band.
Reverend one. Yeah,
Right,
Uriah
Heep.
Heep is a
Yeah.
band.
Rev Melch.
Is it Melchett?
MELCHISEDECH.
Let me see it.
I don't know where to start.
Melch's deck.
Yeah, Melch's deck.
Melch's deck.
Rev Melch's deck.
Yeah, you see, they're all.
They're
Yeah,
all
they are.
Woolrich Bagnet. Mr. Chokachild.
What the fuck?
That's some hard times.
Hard Times is like the worst.
Those
thing
are
I've ever
hard
read.
times.
Hard Times is so boring.
I've never read it.
Decimus Tight Barnacle. Jarvis Lorry. That's not that funny. Uncle Pumblechook, which is the only one I really know, and that's from Great Expectations.
Yes.
He's very mean
book.
too.
That was a great book.
Pleasant Riderhood. Hiram.
Would it be Hiram?
It might be, yeah. Hiram.
looks like
Hiram
Gregis.
Gregarious. It might be a bit like gregarious.
General Grievous, is that what it is?
It's an anagram of gregarious whim.
So the novel.
Can we take a little aside to talk about a theme which I'll develop further later
Yep.
of racism in Dickens books?
Okay.
So
In a 19th century novel, really?
yeah, obviously. But not everyone was racist. But
But I'd say 90% were.
well, it was more prevalent than it is now, and it's very prevalent now.
Yeah.
So anyway, that said, you've obviously got Fagin, which is an anti-Semitic stereotype. I was wondering if Ebenezer Scrooge is also an anti-Semitic stereotype. I don't know. I don't think so. Like, I know it's a English-ish sounding name,
Yeah.
but I was thinking like it could potentially be.
And he doesn't celebrate Christmas.
Yeah. There you go. Then there's also in Bleak House, there's Mrs. Jellyby or something. He mocks her for sending money to Africa, saying that she's like, neglecting her children by doing that or something. And stuff like that. Like, so there's instances of racism which will become more important later on whenever I tell you about the dark side of Dickens.
Oh, God. Here we go. Happy Christmas, guys. So anyway, Martin Chuzzlewit, the novel, Dickens found that personally to be his favourite work up until that time, but sales for it weren't doing very well, and he was facing some financial difficulties. Like, his wife was pregnant with their 5th child, and his publishers were going to reduce his monthly pay by £50 if sales got worse. That's big coin.
Yeah.
Back in that
Huge.
time, £50 would
Yeah,
be
yeah.
big money at that time. Like,
We used to have a first edition of Martin Chuzzlewit.
Did you?
Yeah, 50 quid is probably like £5,000
dough.
or something
It's a
now.
lot
Like
of
it's gonna be
dough.
it's gonna be like a huge difference.
Yeah. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Christmas was becoming quite hot again. It was going through like a renaissance of popularity. And Dickens liked Christmas. He was a Christmas guy. And it's thought that a couple of like other literary works might have had an influence on him. One example being there was a couple of essays by this guy called Douglas Jerrold. One was called How Mr. Chokepear Keeps a Merry Christmas. And there was one called The Beauties of the Police, which is...
What?
Does he mean like the police, as in like, don't stand? But Dickens, he was inspired by like things like fairy tales and children's stories, like stories of transformation. So basically the pressure was on for Charlie Day, and he started writing A Christmas Carol in October 1943. And one of his most famous biographers, Michael Statler, he would describe the book as being written in a white heat. He finished the book in 6 weeks.
Holy shit.
So, as I said earlier, the main character of the novel is Ebenezer Scrooge, a miserly London businessman. Now, I've got with me today Oxford Words Classics, A Christmas Carol, and we're going to read some extracts from the novel just to get a wee idea of sort of like the style that Dickens wrote in and like how descriptive he was with his characters and things like that. So let me see.
All I could think about while you were saying that was Grandpa Simpson being like, we used to wear an onion on our belt. As was the style of the time.
So let's see. So yeah, we're reading from A Christmas Carol, the original text here, and this is a little snippet where we're first introduced to Scrooge as a character. So, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner, hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel had ever struck out generous fire, secret and self-contained, and solitary as an oyster.
Definitely.
I just think that's brilliant.
It's
Phenomenal
brilliant.
writing.
It's brilliant writing. Definitely an anti-Semitic stereotype. I don't know. I'm just joking.
A frosty rime was on his head and on his eyebrows and his wiry chin. He carried his own low temperature always about with him. He iced his office in the dog days and didn't thaw it 1 degree at Christmas. Love that.
Yeah, very good.
Now, some believe Dickens may have based Scrooge on his own father, a man he both loved and hated, which could be an influence on the transformation of Scrooge, the duality of Scrooge. Like, some believe that the background Dickens gave to Scrooge reflects his own childhood, and like Scrooge is the man that Dickens maybe could have become, but Dickens chose a different path. It's also thought Scrooge could be based off two very famous real-life misers, an eccentric MP called John Ewells and a guy called Jemmy Wood, who owned like an old bank in, what's that, Gloucester?
Yes.
Gloucester Old Bank, and he was actually known by people as the Gloucester Miser. That was his nickname. There's also a reference to this philosopher, Thomas Carlyle.
Oh, we'll come to him later on.
Have you got him as well? Yeah,
I have, yeah.
He asked this, he basically asked the whole sarcastic question, are there not treadmills, gibbets, even hospitals, per rates, new per law, I can't speak, new per law, which is of course very similar to when Scrooge asks in the book, are there no prisons, are there no union workhouses, you know, the treadmill and the per law are in full vigor then, you know?
Yeah, Carlyle's a real piece of shit. We'll come to him in a bit.
There's a funny theory that the name of Scrooge actually came from when Dickens was visiting Edinburgh and he saw a tombstone of a guy called Ebenezer Lennox Scroggy.
Scroggy?
Yeah. And
That's amazing.
whose job was actually on the tombstone, and his job was a mealman, basically like a merchant of corn. And Dickens apparently misread it as a mean man. So after he published A Christmas Carol, Dickens was sort of engaged with other novels, and he didn't really have the time or desire to write another Christmas book. So he then came up with the idea to reach his audience by doing these public readings. And then in 1853 at Christmas, he would give a reading at Birmingham Town Hall where he insisted that tickets be reserved for the working class at a quarter of the price. And it was a huge success. His readings would of course be like, it would be abbreviated. He wouldn't be reading the entire thing.
Yeah,
it would take
an
quite
abridged
a long time.
version.
Abridged version, yeah. Otherwise you'd be there for a long time.
Yeah.
And
He'd be there for like 3 days or something.
So, and he would do these performances 127 times until he died in 1870.
Holy shit.
So, if there's anything we want to mention about Anything else about Dickens before I move
Do
on?
you want to hear about the darker side of
Yeah,
Dickens?
why not? It's
Okay,
Christmas.
so even though there's lots of really positive things you can say about Dickens, like he did incredible work in England. He had like amazing empathy for other people in his own society. But unfortunately, that same empathy was not extended to colonial subjects in the colonies.
Okay.
So the main incident, like there are other incidents that I could bring up, but I've forgotten where they are. I can dig them up in a minute if you want. I think he calls Indians dogs at one point, but
Like natives or Indian people?
no, like Indian people in India.
A common belief.
Also, an interesting thing while we're on the topic, there is one time where Churchill was working as a journalist in India. And there was a rebellion that killed some British soldiers, and he referred to them as perfidious vermin, I believe. Yeah, I know. It's not good. He also withheld the fact that the British had lost the battle whenever he was reporting it, and only put that in a private letter to his mother,
Like
I
GB
believe.
News.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Very, very similar. Anyway, so Dickens was on the wrong side of the debate over something called the Morant Bay Uprising, which was an anti-colonial rebellion that took place in Jamaica. Basically, after this had happened, a British colonial administrator who was in charge butchered nearly 500 people and burned 1,000 houses. And there was like a hotly contested debate in England at the time because his actions were both shocking, but also crucially had broken the law. So a number of prominent intellectuals rushed to his defense because they believed non-white people were savages and didn't deserve the same rights.
Well,
Unfortunately,
this is what happens when you don't travel.
yeah.
You become very small-minded.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah, exactly. So unfortunately, Dickens was among them, but the group was led by Thomas Carlyle and also included the poet laureate Alfred Tennyson, unfortunately.
Charge of Light Brigade.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were opposed by a group led by John Stuart Mill, which argued with a lot of foresight, given the events of the 20th century, that if rulers in the colonies could flagrantly I'm starting to slur my words. 2 recordings in one day.
Christmas. Right?
That if rulers in the colonies could flagrantly abuse the law, what would stop them doing the same at home? The group that opposed them also included Charles Darwin. Also, just as an interesting aside, most people misunderstand Darwin's theory, like the origin of the species.
Yeah.
In reality, he argued that cooperation was the dominant and most productive evolutionary path. Also, he never used the term survival of the fittest in his writing. That was a later interpretation. I forget the guy who came up with it. But as a result of Darwin, people calling themselves Darwinists, nowadays they would call themselves social Darwinists, presumably because economics has been like completely taken off the table, as we'll explain later on. But it's used to kind of like naturalize a less regulated version of capitalism, like a more cutthroat version. Again, we'll come on to that later.
Okay. So we'll move on to our film then. So our film, The Muppets Christmas Carol, was of course adapted from the Dickens novella. And while there was, of course, some artistic license taken to sort of suit the Muppets, it does closely follow.
No.
It does closely follow like the origins of the story. Now, this would be the 4th theatrical Muppet film, and it was the first to be produced following the death of its creator, Jim Henson, and one of the performers, Richard Hunt. So Jim Henson, he created the Muppets in 1955, long time ago. I assumed it would have been like 70s or something. That's way, way later than I thought it would be. And they have since become a massive, massive media franchise. Like their early appearances, they came on Sesame Street in 1969.
First,
Yeah. But then they sort of achieved like a celebrity status and like this international recognition when you had The Muppet Show, which ran between 76 and 81. And then you had The Muppet Movie, The Great Muppet Caper, and The Muppets Take Manhattan. They all hit the cinemas like in the late 80s. And during the late 80s, Disney started to get involved with them. So Jim Henson, he died in 1990 from strep. You know that condition.
That's a strep cough. It's just a cough.
It's basically having the worst throat in the world and you die from it. Yeah.
Fucking hell.
He died at the age of 53, and his son, Brian Henson, was approached by a talent agent, Bill Haber, to adapt A Christmas Carol. So the long-time Muppets writer, Jerry Jewell, he started working on the script, and he decided to actually put Dickens himself in the film to act as a narrator, which would allow them to remain faithful to like some of the original prose in the novel.
This is the mistake that there's a TV series that was made of Catch-22, and the mistake they made was taking out the narration, which is some of the funniest bits in the book.
It's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you're going to adapt a book, you need to include the narration in some way.
Yeah, and they do it very, very well here because Brian Henson, he decided to have the Muppet Gonzo play Dickens in the film. He chose Gonzo because he was like the least likely choice. You know, he's just like this fucking blue whatever creature, and he would have his little companion Rizzo the rat with him to like inject some like humor into the narration, like to sort of bounce off each other. It was originally supposed to be a TV film for ABC, but Disney really, really wanted it, and they bought the script for a feature film instead. Now, when they were casting for the lead role of Scrooge, Michael Caine actively pursued the role. He had missed out on appearing on the Muppet Show in the 70s, and he remembered how like some of his closest friends like Roger Moore, John Cleese, Peter Sellers and Sylvester Stallone, they'd all appeared on the show, and they told him they had enormous fun doing it. So he was like, I'm raging I missed out on that. So Caine basically got...
So he had FOMO, basically?
Yeah, pretty much. So Caine got his agent to badger Jim Henson into setting up a meeting. So whenever Michael met with Brian Henson, he told him, quote, I'm going to play this movie like I'm working with the Royal Shakespeare Company. I will never wink. I will never do anything Muppety. I am going to play Scrooge as if it is an utterly dramatic role and there are no puppets around me.
And he's so good.
Henson loved that. And he would cast Michael immediately after.
He totally does wink a wee bit at the end, though.
Oh yeah,
like,
not
literally wink, but like, you know,
but he's doing the song.
He breaks that a wee bit.
Oh, he's cheerful at the end. Yeah.
But Scrooge is cheerful at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
What I mean is like the way it's done.
It's a song.
Well, no, not even just the song. Like in his mannerisms, I was like watching him very closely at the end. But anyway, it doesn't matter.
So Michael Caine, he would be inspired by things like Wall Street cheats and embezzlers for doing the role. He thought they sort of represented a strong picture of just like meanness and greed. And to play this role as Michael Caine did, it's not an easy task. Like he played this role as serious as a car crash, and he treated the Muppets as though they were real. It's a fucking fantastic performance. And Michael Caine, Sir Michael Caine, I should maybe say, he considers this role to be one of the most memorable to him personally. He also didn't actually realize that this was Brian Henson's directorial debut until like halfway through the production, and he was very, very impressed by him.
Interesting.
Kermit the Frog gave an interview in which he said that the most important piece of acting advice ever given to him was by Sir Michael Caine on the set of the movie. Michael Caine's advice for Kermit the Frog was never blink. Got a few stories about Michael Caine. So his accent once got him in bother for being some kind of drug lord. So he was at this big VIP party in the Philippines, and whoever was hosting it came up to him.
In the Philippines?
In the Philippines, yeah. Whoever was hosting the party came up to him, and she was furious, and she accused him of selling cocaine to the other guests. And Michael was like, obviously like, no, I'm not. Like, why would you say that? And she's like, then why is everyone calling you my cocaine? So it was like the pronunciation of his name.
Oh my God,
Brilliant.
that's so funny.
During the 60s, he would chain smoke 4 packs of cigarettes a day, 80 fags a day.
Jesus Christ tonight.
I was nearly Michael Caine when we were in Vietnam and Hanoi. I remember there was one day, I remember distinctly, we were out in the piss all day, and I remember at one point going, I'm opening my 3rd packet of fags of the day, and I woke up the next day with no fags left, and I was like, oh, that's great, isn't it? So yeah, 80 fags a day, and he was also a bit of a piss artist. He would drink 1 or 2 bottles of vodka a day as well.
Fucking hell.
Yeah. And he would say, like, the best research for playing a drunk is being a British actor for 20 years. This is funny. One of the people who actually persuaded Michael Caine to stop this daily binge was actually Belfast-born Alex Higgins.
Oh.
Like one of the most iconic snooker players of all time, who was no saint himself.
But didn't take the advice
The guy was a maniac, yeah, but obviously he didn't want to see his friend fall into that same spiral that he was sort of under.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah. This is great. In 1959, Michael, he was understudy to Peter O'Toole in a play called The Long and the Short and the Tall.
Oh my God.
Peter
O'Toole, Lawrence Arabia.
Notorious Hellraiser, yes. He invited Michael to dinner after one of the shows on a Saturday, and they basically sat down to eat chips and drink brandy. Then Michael, the next thing he remembers is he woke up in a strange flat in the same bed as Peter O'Toole at 5 p.m. and he was like, oh, thank God it's Sunday because, you know, there's no show on today. And then some woman appeared in the flat and informed him it was Monday. 2 days since they sat down to eat chips and drink brandy. So they had to rush to the Royal Court Theatre for the 8 p.m. performance. And while en route, Peter told Michael, never ask what you did. It's better not to know.
That sounds very sinister.
Yeah. Two of Michael's best friends were actors Sidney Poitier and Sean Connery, and those two guys were very, very keen golfers. And Michael, he tried his hand at golf as well. So when he went out to play golf with him, apparently it made Sidney very sad, but it infuriated Sean Connery. And Michael noted like Connery had the most terrible temper when trying to teach him golf. And he got so angry trying to teach him that he ended up snatching the club from his hands and just snapping it in two. And Michael never played golf again.
I could totally see Connery doing that.
Yeah. So, obviously, as we said, this was the first major Muppet project after the creator Jim Henson's death. And Jim, he played and voiced Kermit the Frog. So the role of Kermit the Frog was handed down to Steve Whitmire. And he said he was like incredibly nervous after taking on such an iconic character. Like, everyone knows fucking Kermit the Frog. Like, he's so iconic. So they filmed all of this at Shepperton Studios in England, and they had to build the sets in such a way that, you know, the human actors and the Muppets could both be in shot. So parts of the floor would be like removed and reinserted. You know, Michael Caine could have been walking across like narrow planks sometimes, like what they did in Lord of the Rings, like with like Ian McKellen and the Hobbit actors, things like that. So this film, I feel like this is sort of like, this is my Christmas film. It is undoubtedly my favorite. I watch it every year on Christmas Eve after the pub before bed while I cook the Christmas ham and drink gallons of Baileys. And I think it's fair to say it is the best adaptation of A Christmas Carol there is. And there have been some great ones over the years. There's one from 1951 with Alistair Sim playing Scrooge, and he really kind of set the standard for how Scrooge should be played as a character. But it's great. Like, it's a very gothic and haunting kind of adaptation of the film.
That sounds like
the novel,
that sounds
even,
more up my street.
But there's another great one from the 80s. You probably like this, with George C. Scott playing Dickens. Very good. And there's one with Patrick Stewart as well.
No way.
I haven't seen it.
But be interesting.
That's very funny.
And there's a musical one from the 70s with Albert Finney as Scrooge.
Another musical.
There's an animated one with Jim Carrey voicing Scrooge from 2009.
I saw that with school, so I
haven't seen that one. Yeah, there's a lot. Basically, there is a lot. But I feel like what the Muppets version does is it gives us magic. It gives us like a spirit of Dickensian magic that the other adaptations I've seen haven't. And it really respects the source material as well. Now,
it's hilarious, isn't it? That they do, like, they use a lot of Dickens quotes and stuff.
It's by inserting the narrator into the work. They're allowed to do that, and it's a really, really clever move. Like, what makes the novel so good and elevates it is the first-person narrative from a character who appears to be Dickens himself, and that's where much of its charm comes from. Like, we'll take a wee look at the very, very first two paragraphs of the novel. Let me get to it here. Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good upon change for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Marty was as dead as a doornail. Mind, I don't mean to say that I know of my own knowledge that there is particularly anything dead about a doornail. I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade. But the wisdom of our ancestors is in the simile, and my unhallowed hands shall not disturb it, or the country's done for. You will therefore permit me to repeat.
All right, Dickens.
You will therefore permit me to repeat emphatically that Marley was as dead as a doornail. And he carries this on for the entire book. And like, look at everything he's done here. He's like standing at our elbow basically the whole way through this novel, like guiding us through it and giving us all these great in-depth descriptions of things. It's incredible.
So what I interpreted that as when I first heard it was that Marley was dead when he was alive, if that makes sense. You're like dead inside.
You could say that.
That's the way I interpreted it.
He was always dead.
Yeah, he was dead from the start or whatever.
Yeah.
You know?
So yeah, in the film we mentioned earlier, Dickens is a character played by Gonzo, this little blue creature known as a whatever, and he's joined by Rizzo the rat, a rat from New Jersey apparently, and all the rats in the Muppets seem to be from New York or New Jersey in the film. Who's and their purpose in the film, it's sort of like the Greek chorus, which goes back to like ancient Greek theater. It's performers who would like comment on what was going on during the play to the audience, things like that,
Okay.
So we meet Gonzo and Rizzo in this Muppet Victorian market. It's a very clever setup in that, like, Rizzo, he kind of takes umbrage with Gonzo claiming that he's the most equipped to embody Dickens. And he's like, I know the story of A Christmas Carol like the back of my hand, And Rizzo's like, prove it, So Gonzo starts describing the back of his hand. And it's like, oh, there's a little mole there, And this is where, like, the genius really lies here. It's like, it may seem like a cheap gag for cheap laughs, but it does reflect Dickens' writing. This is a story told by an obtrusive narrator who will be as important as Scrooge in the telling of the story. And I love that whole intro. The whole song, it's an amazing opening song. The way like the foreboding music, the way it starts, and then you don't see Scrooge's face. You just see his body. You just see like the swishing cloak, this harsh stride, the click of the cane as he goes down. It's a perfect way to introduce an iconic character.
There goes Mr. Humbug.
There goes Mr. Humbug. There goes Mr. Grimm.
Here, what's the deal with Humbug?
Humbug. That's a Dickens one, isn't it?
Yeah, but like,
did he just invent that?
I'm pretty sure he did.
Yeah.
Well, I found out
a humbug.
Humbugs are like wee mints. Like,
it's like a little sweet.
There was a very funny part in that intro where you see like a vegetable cart being brought along, and the fruit and veg in the cart are being like, "We're being stolen! Help me!" It's like, shut up! Hits them.
Yeah, it's directly from Dickens, so it is. Humbug would mean balderdash, nonsense, or rubbish.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the song's so good, it builds up like the reputation of Scrooge before you've met the character. This guy means business. He's shrewd. He's determined, and do not get in this guy's way. Like, there's a great wee line in the song. Was it, when a cold wind blows, it chills you to the bone. But there's nothing in nature that freezes your heart like years of being alone. That's fucking poetry. That's amazing. Like, that's fucking fantastic.
And no cheeses for us Mises.
No cheeses for us Mises. Even the vegetables don't like them. It's like the song, it builds them up really masterfully. It's really, really good. And like, a part of me, when I watched that whole like opening song, I was like, do you think the real reason Scrooge is so miserable is because the whole town song bashes him every day when he goes to work? But it's great the way they interlay like the wee little lines you get. Like, he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, during the song. It takes little breaks, really, really good. And yeah, like Michael Caine, like, he doesn't utter a single word in the whole song. It's just his stride and his body language, and then you get that like steely kind of glare at the end of it. And he becomes like the archetypal Scrooge, and like it's easily one of the most memorable parts of the film is the intro. So they go inside and they're in Scrooge's office. Was it Scrooge and Marley? Yeah. And it's Christmas Eve. It's in Marley's, which
Statler and Waldorf.
Before I read the book, I thought there was two Marleys because of this film as well. So obviously the film, it's set on Christmas Eve, and he's in his office, and Scrooge comes in and he speaks to Cratchit, who's Kermit the Frog. He's like, let us deal with the eviction notices for tomorrow, Mr. Cratchit. And he's like, tomorrow's Christmas, sir. He's like, very well, you may gift wrap them.
I totally missed that.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Bob Cratchit is such a spineless lickspittle. I just got that written in my notes.
He says, Scrooge, he's like, Christmas is a very busy time for us, Mr. Cratchit. People preparing feasts, giving parties, spending the mortgage money on frivolities. One might say that December is the foreclosure season. Harvest time for the moneylenders. Great line. Brilliant line, And Scrooge's nephew ends up coming in. He's sort of inviting him to Christmas dinner, and Scrooge doesn't have any of it. He hates it. Like, there's a great wee part where Kermit and the rats who like work there, they're all talking to Scrooge and like, if you please, Mr. Scrooge, it's gotten a lot colder, and the bookkeeping staff with like an extra shovel full of coal for the fire, and they're like, we can't do the bookkeeping, our assets are frozen. He's like, how would the bookkeepers like to be suddenly unemployed? Heat wave! This is my island in the sun.
It's all great.
And yeah, but when his nephew comes in, Fred, Scrooge is asking him, like, what right do you have to be merry? You're poor enough. And he's like, what right do you have to be dismal? You're rich enough, you know, all this kind of stuff. And then there's that great line, it's, if I could work my will, every idiot who goes around with Merry Christmas on his lips would be cooked with his own turkey and buried with a stick of holly through his heart. He's brutal, like, he's
And then your boys come along, not your boys, your guy comes along collecting for
charity.
Yeah, collecting for charity, and he gets turned out. What's the Muppet character called?
Me. That guy.
Oh yeah.
I forgot his name.
Yeah, I was just going to say about that bit, that's like an illustration of the rich assuaging their like vestigial consciences while keeping the structure that's immiserating the poor in place.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, we'll throw you a couple of crumbs at Christmas, you know, but we're not going to like materially change anything for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Baker.
That's it, yeah. And then there's like the doctor kind of guy.
Dr. Bunsen Honeydew.
I love it.
So like no eyes, just
glasses.
So they arrive to ask Scrooge to give like a charitable donation, and we'll take a wee bit from the book here. So they arrive in, they ask, at this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute who suffer greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessaries. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts, sir. And are there no prisons? Asked Scrooge. Plenty of prisons, said the gentleman. And the union workhouses? Demanded Scrooge. Are they still in operation? They are, still, returned the gentleman. I wish they could say they were not. The treadmill and the poor law are in full vigour then, said Scrooge. Both very busy, sir. Oh, I was afraid from what you said at first that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course, said Scrooge. I'm very glad to hear it. Brian. Like, are there no prisons, no workhouses for them to go to, you know?
Another interesting fact about Dickens himself. So while he was, you know, he would always go and like visit prisoners in prison, but at the same time, he would always support, you know, like random arbitrary laws that could land more people in prison. So he had this real like weird duality about him.
Yeah. So Dickens tells Fred, his nephew, you know, I do not make merry myself at Christmas. And the kind, humble employee, you know, Bob Cratchit and the other bookkeepers, they end up requesting him, you know, to not work on Christmas Day since there will be no business for Scrooge on the day, to which he reluctantly agrees. You know, it was, he says it's
he gives him a half day.
A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every December. They sort of say, like, it'll waste a lot of expensive coal for the fire.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I was surprised that he gave it to them based on that flimsy excuse.
Yeah. So after that, you move on to the whole part with Marley and Marley. So, so that night, Scrooge, he returns home, and when he gets there, he's greeted like at the doorknob where it like transforms into like Marty's face, and it shouts Scrooge at him, which already sets a bit of like terror in him, you know. And he goes into his house and he's searching around all the rooms. He ends up like attacking his own very expensive like he's like, my best dressing gown.
Eats himself a lonely dinner and doesn't light the fire or nothing. And
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's a thin gruel, tin gruel.
There's a good line where they're talking about how he didn't mind the darkness because it's cheaper or something.
Yeah, it was cheap. Darkness was cheap, and Scrooge liked it. Yeah. So when he's there that night, he ends up in the film, obviously, he's encountered by the shackled ghosts of his late business partners, Jacob and Robert Marley in the bed chambers. Look, it's Ebenezer Scrooge, looking older and more wicked than ever. I knew he wouldn't disappoint us.
Statler and Waldorf.
Yeah.
But there's a great line.
They're the ultimate hecklers of the Muppets.
There's a great line, and he's trying to explain it to himself, or trying to explain the aberration of these.
Or like
ghosts.
rationalize it.
Yeah, and he's like, it's probably just something I had for dinner.
You may be a bit of undigested beef, a blob of mustard, a crumb of cheese. Yes. There's more of gravy than of grave about you.
Yeah.
Maybe a crumb of cheese or something. Yeah.
There's more of gravy than the grave to you.
Yeah. That's in it. Yeah.
A blob of
That
mustard,
was really good.
a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. Yeah, very, very. Yeah, so basically, they're there to like basically warn Scrooge to repent against his wicked ways, or he'd be condemned to suffer in the afterlife as they do, and that he'll be visited by three spirits throughout the night.
And they're each bound by a chain. Well, and the real Marty's bound by a chain and he's forged his whole life.
You get that in the book here. Yeah, Scrooge asks him, you know, you're fettered, tell me why. And the ghost replies, I wear the chain I forged in life. I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Is its pattern strange too? Sorry, I just lost myself.
Would you like to talk about the effect that like power and wealth has on the brain?
Yeah,
That might be a good point to do it.
sounds good to me.
So there's a study by the American Psychological Association that found the more power someone has, power in this instance being the ability to transform another person's circumstances, the less motor resonance or mirroring they do of others. So basically that means like whenever you're talking to someone, you'll naturally kind of copy what they're doing, or you'll like match each other. You'll face each other. You might like both lean forward or lean back or whatever.
Oh, right.
Because
yeah,
it like, I don't know, it sets the other person more at ease or something. So you'll like fall into a kind of
Mimic them almost. Like,
yeah.
but
You'll fall
follow
into
their
like
lead.
you'll fall into like a synchronization basically.
gesture matching. Or
Yeah,
something
that's exactly it. Yeah. So very powerful people won't do that. And further research by a guy called Dacher Keltner has suggested that once people gain power over others, they tend to behave in a similar way to people with a specific kind of brain injury. So they resemble patients who have damage to the brain's orbitofrontal lobes, which means that increasing wealth and power has the same effect as removing the part of the brain that is, quote, critical to empathy and socially appropriate behavior, which makes perfect sense when you think about it.
Yeah.
Speaking of socially appropriate behavior, did you see Trump and Macron? They met yesterday.
No.
Do you remember back in 2017?
You mean they met 2 weeks ago or something?
Do you remember back in 2017 they had the 30-second handshake where neither of them
Oh,
let
yeah.
go?
Oh,
Yeah, it was like a dick measuring contest.
But it happened again yesterday, but Trump dominated him.
He was like, I'm not going to make that mistake again.
Yeah, they're like shaking hands, and like Trump's like pulls him forcibly into him, and all. It looks ridiculous. Like, it's
So
like
pathetic.
Such a like obvious trying to get the
I'm making a
upper
power
hand.
move.
Yeah.
But all Trump supporters are like, that's how you handshake. They've really showed him.
Yeah.
Dominated that handshake.
Yeah,
That's our precedent.
Yeah, it's two pathetic little men trying to fight over who's the bigger guy. Pathetic. Anyway, so additionally, the more wealth you have, the worse you are apparently at judging other people's emotions, because you have a reduced ability to make empathic inferences based on facial expressions, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
Also kind of makes sense, like if you're extremely wealthy, you're probably going to be more cut off from other people. You're going to live like away from other people, maybe in like a big estate or something. You'll only see like your immediate family
behind
regularly.
big walls.
Yeah, you'll see the reason why if you go to like rich suburbs as opposed to like more working class areas where people live in closer proximity and have to, negotiate and chat and like intercourse with other people more often. So it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. So that night then at 1:00, Scrooge is visited by the childlike ghost of Christmas past, who's kind of like a poached egg.
Yeah, if you fuck it up.
Looks like one of your Donegal poached eggs. And
Hey, that was the egg's fault, not mine.
And the whole purpose of the Ghost of Christmas Past is to show Scrooge visions of like his childhood and his early adult life.
Oh, at the school and all.
Yeah, they end up.
Yeah.
Dickens and Rizzo end up joining them as well. They end up hooking themselves onto them so they can come with them and tell the story.
It's Sam Eagles, the teacher.
Yeah, you can see he's like, tomorrow you become a man of business. He's like, I'm looking forward to it, headmaster.
Yeah,
Like,
he's like, it's the American way. And then so one of them one of them whispers in his ear and he's like, it's the British way.
yeah, that's great. And then you get to see Scrooge's time as an employee at Fozziwig's rubber chicken factory. Which I he died when I saw that.
I know.
It's Fozziwig's rubber chicken factory.
And it's Fozzie Bear.
Yeah, it's Fozzie Bear, yeah. And they're there at the Fozziwig's Christmas party, having a great time, and Scrooge ends up meeting a young woman there named Belle, with whom he ends up sort of falling in love with, but he ends up losing her as he pretty much ends up choosing the rat race of money over her, and Scrooge sees this with the Ghost of Christmas Past.
Yeah, what exactly, what does he say to her? Or like, what does she say to him that like breaks it up? I just can't remember.
It's actually, there was a whole part deleted from that scene where they have a like breakup. There was like a song in there as well and something.
Right.
It was cut out. Yeah.
Thank
but
God.
I think that gave it more context though.
Right.
In the grand scheme of things. Yeah. But like obviously Scrooge, like the older Scrooge, he's seeing all this and he becomes quite tearful. And when he's done with the Ghost of Christmas Past, he says, leave me, and he ends up returning home. And then the next, Scrooge meets the gigantic merry ghost of Christmas Present, whose whole purpose is to show him, the joys and the wonder of Christmas Day. Let's have a wee look at the book here.
And know me better, man.
Yeah. So another great example of Dickens,
Oh yeah, it's the ghost with Alzheimer's.
He's got a big, bountiful harvest around him.
yeah.
Well, let's see.
Corn of plenty.
We'll see the introduction to the character from the novel here. So it was his own room. There was no doubt about that. But it had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceilings were so hung with living green that it looked like a perfect grove, from every part of which bright gleaming berries glistened. The crisp leaves of holly, mistletoe, and ivy reflected back in the light, as if so many little mirrors had been scattered there. But such a mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney as a dull petrification of a hearth had never known in Scrooge's time, or Marley's, for many and many a winter season gone. Heaped up on the floor to form a kind of throne were turkeys, geese, game, poultry, brawn, great joints of meat, suckling pigs, long wreaths of sausages, mince pies, plum puddings, barrels of oysters, red hot chestnuts, cherry-cheeked apples, juicy, I'm running out of breath, juicy oranges, luscious pears, immense 12th cakes, and seething bowls of punch that made the chamber dim with their delicious steam. In easy state upon this couch there sat a jolly giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch, in shape not unlike Plenty's horn, and held it up, high up, to shed its light on Scrooge, as he came peeping round the door. "Come in!" exclaimed the ghost. "Come in and know me better, man." Brilliant.
Very good.
See, Scrooge and the Ghost of Christmas Present, he's almost like a Santa Claus kind of guy, the way he's like portrayed. Even you
Saint Nicholas.
You haven't seen the cover.
Oh yeah,
They're
massive
very
Saint
much
Nick.
like a Saint Nicholas kind of guy. He's like Christmas, obviously Christmas Day.
Little Saint Nicholas fact. Obviously,
Was he racist?
probably, but no, that's not what I was gonna say. He originally was green, so like
Yes.
he would wear a green outfit.
Coca-Cola.
Yeah, Coca-Cola changed him red.
Yeah. Consumerism. Eyes wide shut.
There you go.
So. Yeah, and then Scrooge and the Ghost of Christmas Present, they end up visiting Fred's house, Scrooge's nephew, where Scrooge is like, he's sort of made fun of for
They're
his...
playing animal, vegetable, mineral.
Yeah, like guess who I'm talking about kind of thing, And he's sort of made fun of for how stingy he is and like his general sort of ill will toward people. And then Scrooge and the spirit, they end up visiting Bob Cratchit's house, where it's sort of a time where he learns that like the Cratchit family are very content with what little they do have. Let me see, where am I in the book here?
Miss Peggy.
Yeah, Miss Peggy's brilliant in that. It's like, she's like, you got the goose going, and the one Peter's like, "It smells so good, mother." And she's like, "It does, doesn't it?" Looking in the mirror.
That sounded like Yoda.
Yeah, they're very similar. Yeah. There's definitely a link with Yoda in the Muppets.
Is there?
He's a puppet.
Wasn't that?
Is it the same
Look up
actor or
Yoda
something?
performer.
Who puppeteered Yoda? Frank Oz.
Frank Oz, who's he?
I swear I saw him in the credits.
Yeah, he's something to do with it.
Oh yeah, he performed Miss Piggy, Fuzzy Bear, Animal.
There you go. Animal. Quiet! No, where was it? See, I was going to look in the book here when Scrooge comes to the Cratchit's house. "And how did little Tim behave?" asked Mrs. Cratchit when she had rallied Bob in his credulity. And Bob had hugged his daughter to his heart's content. "As good as gold," said Bob, "and better. Somehow he gets thoughtful, sitting by himself so much, and thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me coming home that he hoped the people saw him in church because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see." Bob's voice was tremulous when he told them this, and trembled more when he said that Tiny Tim was growing strong and hearty. His active little crutch was heard upon the floor, and back came Tiny Tim before another word was spoken, escorted by his brother and sister to his stool before the fire. I almost got quite sad reading that. So Scrooge is obviously taking pity upon Bob's terminally ill son, Tiny
Wait, so
Tim.
what's wrong with him?
Some Victorian disease. It'll be like what would you-
Consumption.
something brutal, something very Victorian.
But it's like he's going to die if Scrooge doesn't give Bob Cratchit a raise, basically.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at least pay for the Christmas dinner.
Yeah.
Buy him dinner at Change Day.
He's gonna starve to death if you don't buy a turkey for Christmas.
See a Scrooge.
Sounds like a bit of arm twisting going on there.
So Scrooge ends up taking pity on Bob's ill son, Tiny Tim, and the ghost comments, he'll soon die if things continue the way they are. So yeah, another wee extract from the book here for when the Cratchits are enjoying their Christmas day. So
They want to thank their employer, don't they?
oh yeah,
The giver of the feast.
and badly dressed.
Yeah, as I said, Bob Cratchit, spineless, just happy to be there. Has no idea he's being exploited.
Yeah,
But his wife does.
yeah, she's like the ultimate socialist.
Well, she's like more clear-eyed about the situation, whereas he's like just, happy to get any paycheck.
Yeah.
Doesn't realize that he's being fucked.
So yeah, once they've done all this, the ghost of Christmas Present, he ends up leaving Scrooge. He's growing older and older by the second because he can only remain and live in the present. He always obviously goes back to just the present of that day, So once they're reaching the end of the Christmas day that they're in, the ghost leaves Scrooge with the ghost of Christmas yet to come.
Which is
Very
actually
spooky.
quite scary.
Very, see when you're a child?
Yeah.
Fuck me, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
Like a
I can
ring race
imagine.
nearly.
Yeah.
Like an early ring race.
Yeah,
Compared to the films, obviously.
I saw it for the first time in primary school, and that was scary. It was generally scary.
Yeah. And the ghost of Christmas yet to come, he takes Scrooge into the future where they find out this recent death has happened, and it doesn't elicit like any sympathy from the residents of London, and like there's all these stolen possessions of the deceased being sold to this guy called Old Joe.
Selling his
That
bed
spider
sheets
guy,
and-
like the
drapes.
drapes, things like that. And the ghost also shows Scrooge the Cratchits' home, where they find Bob and his family sadly mourning Tiny Tim. Let me
And
see.
Scrooge is hit by that.
Yeah, here we go. So here's a wee extract from the novel of this scene. She hurried out to meet them, and little Bob, in his comforter, he had no need of it, poor fellow, came in. His tea was ready for him on the hob, and they all tried who should help him to it the most. Then the two young Cratchits got upon his knees and laid each child a little cheek against his face, as if they said, "Don't mind it, father, don't be grieved." Bob was very cheerful with them and spoke pleasantly to all the family. He looked at the work upon the table and praised the industry and speed of Mrs. Cratchit and the girls. They would be done long before Sunday, he said. "Sunday? You went today, then, Robert?" said his wife. "Yes, my dear," returned Bob. "I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green a place it was. And you'll see it often. I promised him that I would walk there on a Sunday. My little, little child," cried Bob. "My little child." He broke down all at once. He couldn't help it. If he could have helped it, he and his child would have been further apart perhaps than they were. He left the room and went upstairs into the room above, which was lighted cheerfully and hung with Christmas. There was a chair set close beside the child, and there were signs of someone having been there lately. Poor Bob sat down in it, and when he had thought a little and composed himself, he kissed the little face. He was reconciled to what had happened and went down again quite happy.
Jesus Christ.
It's funny after, because I'd obviously seen the Muppets Christmas Carol a long time before I read the Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
And when you're reading it, you do just picture all the Muppets. Like Tiny Tim is
The felt frog.
Yeah, is the felt frog. Bob Cratchit is the same. Miss Piggy's there. Like it's it's what's all you're getting in your head.
I feel it's funny because I'd read the book before seeing the movie.
For
so
me,
it's kind of-
it isn't Christmas until you see Michael Caine crying over a felt frog. Yes, Scrooge is then led to the cemetery where the ghost ends up pointing out to this neglected grave of an unloved man, a man that no one cared about, and Scrooge ends up wiping away the snow from the tombstone to see it's his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. And this is what leads him to sort of, he tearfully vows, I will change my ways, I will keep, what was the line? I will keep Christmas.
I will, yeah.
It's all about keeping Christmas. You like to keep Christmas.
I do.
You see in the book here.
Whenever I saw that bit, because it was after the bit where they were like celebrating his death, I was like, oh my God, Scrooge is the United Health CEO who just got assassinated.
Let me see. Yeah, in the book it says, I will honour Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone. In his agony he caught the spectral hand. It sought to free itself, but he was strong in his entreaty, and detained it. The spirit stronger yet repulsed him. Holding up his hands in a last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration on the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed and dwindled down into a bedpost. So obviously he ends up waking up then following this. It's Christmas Day. He's in his own household. He sees his own bed chamber.
He doesn't know it's Christmas Day yet. He has to run to the window.
Oh, true. Sorry. Yeah. And yeah, he goes to the window. He shouts, "You boy, what's today?"
Yeah, what's today?
It's a wee rabbit.
Christmas
It's a wee
Day.
rabbit. He threw a wreath at her.
Yeah.
Yeah, why, sir? It's Christmas Day, you know. And he gets him to go buy like the biggest turkey
Yeah.
in the shop, the butcher, whatever, near the biggest goose.
I think it's goose in the book and then turkey in the movie. Maybe. Or maybe
They've
the
Americanized it, have they?
No, prize turkey.
prize turkey. I
Prize
know.
turkey, not the little prize turkey, the big one.
There we go, yeah.
What a delightful boy. It's a pleasure to talk to him. Yes, my buck.
And then he sets off on a jolly song on the way to...
Very jolly,
Bob Cratchit's.
spreading happiness and joy. He ends
Yeah,
up giving
he's-
the two guys, the
He
two
wears a
charity
red
guys.
scarf and he looks very jolly in
Yeah,
his
they
scarf.
gift him the scarf
Yeah.
and all
From
that.
his-
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Right.
he's like saying Merry Christmas to everyone, like a little bit too close to their face.
Yeah, like desperately trying.
Merry Christmas.
I will not be forgotten in time. And yeah, he ends up going to Bob Cratchit's house, and it's great when he gets there. He sort of like puts on the show that, you know, like, you weren't here for work, you know, kind of thing. He's very stern,
Yeah,
all
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
thing,
yeah.
and he tells him he's going
And
to raise his
Miss
salary.
Piggy's about to give him what for.
Yeah, he tells him he's going to raise his salary, pay off his mortgage, and yeah, Dickens then sort of tells us that Tiny Tim escaped
Did not
death.
die.
And Tiny Tim, who did not die. It's actually there in capitals, who did not die. So Scrooge became like a second father for Tiny Tim and all that kind of thing. Let me see.
Oh, it's heartwarming.
Yeah, it's a great book. It's a great story. It's really, really wonderful. And did you have any other points you'd like to make?
Yeah, do we want to talk about the parallels between, you know, the Victorian era and like the Gilded Age and nowadays?
Yeah.
So there's a thing that comes up in the film when he's like, you know, is there no workhouses or whatever for the quote unquote surplus population to go to? And I just wrote in my notes, economics isn't a true science. It's basically like philosophy masquerading as science.
Yeah.
I can say this having studied it. You know, it's like basically like someone's opinion dressed up as a law of nature. And the current order that we have is usually presented as being apolitical or non-political and inevitable or natural, whereas any challenge to it is often cast as too political or unnatural. But the current order that we have is actually really similar to the Gilded Age, which was circa 1870s to 1890s. You know, this was more in America, but it has certain parallels to the Victorian Age in Britain. The two periods overlap. So it was a time of intense corruption and legalized bribery. The historian Howard Zinn says the government pretended to be neutral to maintain order, but really served the interests of the rich. Doesn't remind me of anything whatsoever. Can't draw any parallels between that and the present. According to academics Naomi Oreskes, I think that's how you pronounce it, and Eric M. Conway in their fantastic book, The Big Myth, the oligarchs at the time, known as rubber barons, hated the reforms that were, you know, designed at curbing their power, which culminated in the New Deal. And they basically saw this as like a declaration of war, which in their propaganda, they spun as a declaration of war on the quote unquote American way of life. And this basically set in motion a century-long campaign to roll back these reforms, essentially by misinforming the public on an industrial scale. So it's like amazingly laid out in this book. People think that all of this kind of like reaction to the New Deal starts in like the 70s and 80s, but in reality it starts like way back at the time.
Yeah.
You know, with like the Tennessee Valley Authority. There's this story about like electrification where like the government decides that they're gonna connect poor people up in Tennessee to like the electrical grid, and this like horrifies the elite for some reason. and that's kind of like where it all starts. But anyway, they discover these like Austrian economists called Friedrich Hayek and Ludwig von Mises. Mises.
Jesus for us.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking when I was reading this. So they like bring them over to America, and this like unholy union births Milton Friedman, and basically Friedman lays the intellectual foundations for the economic policy that persists in Western countries regardless of who gets into power. Like their economic policy remains exactly the same, more or less. And this is kind of like the process of how that happens.
Yeah.
So it's like a concerted propaganda campaign for like a century that leads to economics being off the table until very recently.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it was one I was led to sort of think about. I would love to see there should be a revitalization of like Muppet adaptations of like classic texts.
There's one that's been written that they never did. They did.
Really?
Because I love this. I love
did.
Muppet Treasure Island.
They did
Brilliant.
Gatsby.
Gatsby?
There's Muppets Great Gatsby, but they never made it.
I can imagine Kermit obviously as Gatsby, Peggy as your woman.
Something that I discovered while I was doing research for this also that I wasn't going to mention, but now that we have in the Baz Luhrmann adaptation of The Great Gatsby, there's 2 characters who it's inferred are members of the Skull and Bones Society.
Really?
That we mentioned last week. Yeah.
It made me think about like Muppet adaptations I would like to see. I was thinking about, I've seen other people mention it before. I'd love to see a Lord of the Rings adaptation of the Muppets.
Oh my god!
But the only human character is Aragorn, and Miss Peggy is Eowyn throwing herself at Aragorn. You know? And then Kermit's Faramir. When Faramir shows up, she like casts Aragorn aside. What else could you do? Passion of the Christ.
Who plays Jesus in that
The
scenario?
guy who throws the fish. Hey, man! Brilliant. Well, guys, that's us for this season and for the year. This has been really great. Really great. Really great. Really great. Sorry, it's
Really big show.
Really big show. Sorry, it's Christmas and I'm pissed. We're really enjoying doing the podcast and we hope you guys are enjoying it as well. We'll be taking a bit of a break for a while, but we will be back and we'll be back bigger, badder, and more controversial than ever before. In the meantime, you guys have a great Christmas. Have a happy New Year. Stay safe. Look after each other and we will see you again. Take it easy.
Thanks, guys.
Yes, remember to deck the halls. It's very important. Do not forget to deck the halls.
There's a guy in the place who's got a bit of sweet face and he goes by the name of Ebenezer Good. His friends call him Easer and he is the main geezer and he vibe up the place like no other man could. He's refined, he's sublime, he makes you feel fine and very much maligned and misunderstood. But if you know Easer, he's a real crowd pleaser. He's ever so good, he's Ebenezer Good. You see that he's